Logan's court was soaked in blood, and that's no exaggeration. As in Erie, cars were overturned, and storefront windows were smashed by looters, with fires burning out of control. But any riots had climaxed and sputtered out like an exhausted lover. Hundreds, possibly thousands of bodies littered the sidewalks and streets. Blood glistened and baked on the asphalt, and countless ghouls milled about, feasting upon those recently killed or searching for survivors to chew upon. We didn't venture into the heart of the city, but instead skirted it, observing the undead population from afar. We pulled over to the sidewalk of the street where several cars had been abandoned and had not been flipped, and took out our hoses. Working with separate vehicles, we each siphoned gas into the tanks of our bikes and into our spare gas cans. I've always loved the smell of gasoline. A low moan rose from behind one car, and then another, and another after that. Looking at each other, we walked between cars. A different sound merged with the moans, accompanying it like a musical instrument, the buzzing of thousands of flies. I saw a dark splotch on the sidewalk, and another after that. Maybe a dozen in all, surrounded by broken glass. Pancakes made out of piles of dirty clothing, with bloodstains radiating outward like maple syrup. Flies swarmed over them, eating, defecating, laying eggs. Armies of black and gold and green. The moans came from the blood-smeared piles. Moving closer to one of the sticky splotches, I discerned the shapes of broken limbs that almost formed a swastika around a human head, which lay flat on one side, no longer supported by its neck. A single eye focused on me, while a shattered jaw worked in a semicircle, a tongue hanging over shattered teeth. It resembled a broken puppet more than a former human being. Judging by the soggy suit that held his body parts together, the mush had once been a man. He didn't seem to mind the winged insects crawling over his eyeballs and over his tongue. Good Christ, Moon said. A few feet away, a woman's face stared out between two mounds of flies that I recognized as breasts. I cocked my head to one side, trying to imagine how her body had turned inside out, but the way she kept licking her lips in hunger caused me to look away. A raised knee protruded from the center of another splotch, creating a fleshy, fly-infested sundial. I looked up at the sky, which framed 12 floors of steel, concrete, and glass. They jumped from the upper floors. Awe dripped from Boone's voice. This building isn't burning, I said. Ghouls drove them out. And then these sorry sons of bitches became ghouls after the impact. The pitiful broken creatures twitched and struggled to move. They wanted to eat us, but their bodies lacked the connections necessary for locomotion. A separate section. I liked the first half of the film. It was more realistic than I expected without the ridiculous CGI special effects that ruined so many movies. The acting was pretty good too. Bruce Willis is more interesting as an old bald guy than he was as a young guy with his day. Gary Dugan was okay too. There was a great car chase and two good shootouts before I sensed we weren't alone in the darkened theater. Sitting up, I looked around. To my left, 3 figures sat behind us. To my right, 6 more. 8 more ghouls sat behind us, which made at least 17 in all. I'd never seen a ghoul sit before. I didn't know it was possible. They always shambled this way or that way, but these men, women, and teenagers sat glued to their seats, staring at the screen. Were they watching the movie, or were they merely transfixed by the light? The light from the screen flickered on their rattan features and highlighted their drawn-in cheeks and sunken eyes. I'll say this much for the dead. At least they don't talk during movies, and there wasn't a cell phone in sight. And then my third section. Kansas was cold in October, and we took to wearing our leather motorcycle jackets over sweatshirts. We also collected a couple of helmets along the way. Who wants to catch an ear infection during a worldwide ghoul epidemic? Avoiding the cities, we passed empty fields, isolated churches, and spinning windmills. We were smack dab in the middle of the country, but less than halfway to LA from where we'd started. Our progress slowed because we stopped to siphon gas whenever the opportunity arose, not just when we needed it. Our canned food held up, but our canned beer ran out, and Boone complained he was running low on weed. We must have been 3/4 of the way across the state when we saw them. Hundreds of wooden crosses on either side of the highway, each one protruding 20 feet from the earth, and each one occupied. The crucified ghouls fixed their stares on us rather than at the heavens above. Their fingers twitched, their tongues rolled, and their heads rolled from side to side. A ghoul with restricted movement pretty much looks like a regular corpse until a spasm of dead flesh catches your attention. Someone's been busy, Boone said. We had slowed to a stop where the crosses started. There's got to be 200 of them. Yeah, none of them are white. Now masked by dead gray flesh, the ghouls had all been minorities at one time. Black, Hispanic, Asian, Arabic. The KKK took my baby away. My stomach turned queasy. Why would anyone possibly separate ghouls into non-white and white camps? And where were the white ghouls? Had they received proper burials? A frightening thought occurred to me. What if these minorities had been crucified when they were still alive? Let's get out of here, yeah. Then we heard the sirens of cherry tops speeding toward us from both directions on the highway. We had discussed what we would do if any of the militant cops we'd heard about ever cornered us, and had decided to go out in a blaze of glory. Unfortunately, we hadn't planned on a half-dozen police cars and another half-dozen redneck pickups bearing down on us before we had much of a chance to react. Boone gave me a wild-eyed look, and I shook my head. The lead cherry top circled us, kicking up dust which rose to the tortured-looking ghouls who had died and risen for our sins. The cars in the middle of the two caravans circled the first cars, which had braked, and the truck circled the outer perimeter. You'd have thought we were Osama bin Laden.